Welcome to today's Key Stage 4 lesson on AQA GCSE English Literature, Paper 2, Section B. This is the Unseen Poetry exam questions, and this is compulsory to all students studying AQA GCSE English Literature. Now, we may not be studying the power and conflict poetry, however, you will still need to learn how to go about answering the Unseen Poetry exam questions. The learning objectives for today are for you to develop understanding of the different components of unseen poetry. So you need to know the different parts of how to go about answering this GCSE exam question. You also need to gain knowledge of how to compare two poems in exam conditions. Finally, I want you to learn how to evaluate what Assessment Objective 1 and Assessment Objective 2 assesses. Now, the Unseen Poetry exam, this part will probably take you around about 45 to 50 minutes. Question 1 is worth 24 marks. This part of the question, the examiner is trying to find out if you have the knowledge of what the poem is about. So here you're going to focus on the poem's messages, the themes and ideas, and that covers Assessment Objective 1. In Assessment Objective 2, you need to look at how the poet uses form, so for example, the line length, rhyme and rhythm, the structure, so the order of ideas, and how language is used to communicate these ideas, and that covers Assessment Objective 2. Now, as well as the 24 marks, you will also be given an additional 4 marks for Assessment Objective 4, which covers spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So therefore, the examiner will look for 4 main things. They will see that you show understanding of the poem, that you can write about the techniques that have been used, that you can support every point with a quote, and that you can use the correct technical terms, for example, stanza and verse, alliteration, metaphor, simile, personification, repetition, for example. The second part of this Unseen Poetry exam is question 2, which is worth 8 marks. Now, question 2 will ask you to compare 2 unseen poems. So the first poem that you will have just focused on for up to 24 marks, and then the second poem. You will need to write about either the similarities or the differences between the 2 poems. The question purely here is about Assessment Objective 2, so the techniques the poet uses and their effect on the reader. So this will focus on the structure, the order of ideas, the form, so the line length, the rhyme or rhythm, and the language. Now, because it is worth 8 marks, you only really need to make 3 or 4 really clear points and back them up with examples from the poem. With the Unseen Poetry question 2, what you will need to do is read the question carefully and underline or highlight the key words. You need to annotate the second poem, focusing on the techniques that have been used and how they affect the reader. Then plan your answer. Again, you only need 3 or 4 similarities or differences. When you come to write your answer, each similarity or difference will be 1 paragraph. You will need to use a quote from the poem, focusing on a specific technique. So, the first poem here, they will give you the question, which obviously focuses on Assessment Objective 1, what the poem is about and its main message, and Assessment Objective 2, the techniques that have been used to write the poem. Now, as you can see here on the right-hand side, you've got 3 words in bold. This will usually be at the bottom of the poetry sheet, so it will let you know these say old-fashioned or unusual words. So, for example here, metronome is a machine that ticks at a constant pace to help musicians stay in time. So they will put this machine on and it will go tick, 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 as fast or as slow as they need the rhythm to be. Plain and pearl are references to the type of stitches in knitting that you may have seen a relative or a great-grandparent make. Finally, skein is a length of wool that has been loosely twisted or coiled together. So it might be a bit of wool that has been like rolled up into a ball, for example. So here are some warm-up questions to help you plan. So what I'd like you to do is you'll need some A4 lined paper and you'll need a pen. I'm going to read the poem to you, and then once I've done that, I want you to pause this recording, and then I want you to answer the questions in as much detail as you can, referring to the question when you give your answer. Remember to include quotations and explain what those quotations mean. So let's have a look at these warm-up questions. Number 1, right, what is the poem about? Number 2, how does the poet suggest that the speaker and his mother were in danger during the bombing? So what pieces of language or words and phrases are there which show you that? Have they used any techniques to show you that? Any use of similes, metaphors, or personification? Question 3. Why do you think the speaker's mother made him hold the wool as she was knitting? Why would she have got him to hold it? What was the purpose of that? Number 4. What emotions does the poet put across? And how do we show these? How does he show these in the poem? So is he angry, scared, confused, bewildered, frustrated? Question 5. How are the last 4 lines of the poem different from the first 12? So as you can see on the page, how are they different? And then why do you think the poet has done this? Question 6. How does the poet use the senses? So sight, sound, smell, taste or touch? How have they used those senses in the poem, and do you think this is effective? Question 7. What do you notice about the rhythm of the poem? So as I read the poem to you, have a really good think about that. And then finally, number 8. Why do you think it's significant that the jumper is shop-bought and black? Why is this description separate from the rest of the stanza? Okay guys, so I'm going to read you now the poem Jumper by Tony Harrison. When I want some sort of human metronome to beat calm celebration out of fear, like that when German bombs fell around our home, it's my mother's needles knitting that I hear. The click of needles steady though walls shake. The stitches, plain or pearl, were never dropped. Bombs fell all that night until daybreak, but not for a moment did the knitting stop. Though we shivered in the cellar's shelters cold, and the whistling bombs sent shivers through the walls, I know now why she made her scared children hold the skein she wound so calmly into balls. We opened presents wrapped before she died. With that same composure shown in that attack, she'd known the time to lay her walls aside. The jumper I opened shop-bought, and he's black. Okay, so as you go through the poem, you might want to look at the semantic field. So that is words related to a certain theme. Are there words that purely relate to war? Are there words that relate to knitting? Are there words there related to certain emotions? If there are, then that is called the semantic field of the poem. Okay, so I want you to pause the PowerPoint presentation here in this recording, and I want you to spend a good half an hour focusing on those questions, please. Okay, welcome back. We're now going to be looking at the Unseen Poetry question 2, which is worth 8 marks. Now, as I've said previously, we need to read the question and underline and highlight the key words. We need to annotate the second poem, focusing on the techniques that are used. So are there similes, using like or as to compare one thing to another? Is it a metaphor, describing one thing as if it's something else? Is it alliteration, the repetition of consonants in a sentence? Is it sibilance, the repetition of that S sound throughout to perhaps represent anger or evil or death? Right, once you've focused and annotated the poem and focused on those techniques, I need you to plan your answer to identify 3 things that are either similar or different to the previous poem. Then when you go about writing your answer, remember each paragraph will focus on one similarity or difference. Remember to use quotations from both poems and focus on the techniques that have been used. Okay. So here is the poem Handbag by Ruth Fainlight. I wanted to read the poem to you first before we look at the question. Now, as you can see there, you've got coty powder, which is like a face powder. And also you can see there a leather handbag, which may have been one similar to that is being spoken about. Handbag. My mother's old leather handbag, crowded with letters she carried all through the war. The smell of my mother's handbag, mints and lipstick and coty powder. The look of those letters softened and worn at the edges, opened, read and refolded so often. Letters from my father. Odour of leather and powder, which ever since then has meant womanliness and love and anguish and war. Okay, so if we have a look at the 2 poems, as you can see here, they are side by side. The question that you are being asked to answer is this. The speakers of handbag and jumper both use an object to convey, to show their feelings about their mothers. What similarities and differences are there in the way these feelings are conveyed? So in handbag, the object is the handbag to convey the feelings about the mother, and it's a jumper in the other poem. So, guys, what are the similarities and differences in the way those feelings are conveyed? And you have 8, that is worth 8 marks, and you need to write about 3 or 4 different things. So I hope that you've managed to spend a good 15 minutes answering that question there. So if we just go back over the learning objectives today, I wanted you to develop your understanding of the different components of the unseen poetry exam, knowing that you have 24 marks for the first question and 8 for the second question. I wanted you to gain knowledge of how to compare the poems in exam conditions, obviously maybe by using a grid to show how they're similar or different, and then using that grid to help you when you write your answer. And finally, we wanted us to evaluate what assessment objective 1 assesses, so looking at what the message of the poem is and how that is being conveyed, and assessment objective 2, focusing on really the technical features inside that poem. Okay, thank you. Well done for listening well today. Take care. Bye-bye.